Everyone thought Pastor Creflo Dollar had everything under control: the power, the fortune, the international fan base, and the assurance of a guy who felt he was selected for something greater. But something was subtly crumbling, piece by piece, underneath that glossy confidence. In recent months, the man who once preached unbreakable prosperity has been forced to confront repercussions he never expected. Now that unpleasant realities are emerging, Creflo Dollar has to deal with the one thing he never warned his supporters about: the idea that everything he created might have been the result of a catastrophic error. The ascension that began in a cafeteria. The narrative of Creflo Augustus Dollar Jr. did not start in a television studio, a mansion, or a large church. It started on January 28, 1962, in College Park, Georgia, in a simple house molded by faith and discipline. His mother was a food server at Kathleen Mitchell Elementary School's cafeteria, while his father was a police officer. That information, looking trivial at the time, would follow him decades later in ways he never expected. He never thought he would be a preacher when he was younger. He continued to pursue his dream of playing professional football when he enrolled at West Georgia College in the early 1980s. However, that route was broken by a severe injury, which was the first of many pivotal moments that would shape his life. During rehabilitation, he started attending Bible study sessions, not out of passion, but because he wanted something to fill the solitude. Yet one day, he recounted feeling born anew, an event that transformed the trajectory of his life permanently. Before long, he was organizing his own little Bible study sessions, which expanded more quickly than he had anticipated. Taffy Bolton, a young woman who would eventually become his wife and a longtime ministry partner, was one among the attendees. After receiving his degree in educational therapy in 1984, Dollar began working with individuals who had learning difficulties at the Bronner Psychiatric Institute. He was skilled at his job, yet he was unable to resist the rising call to ministry. 2 years later, in 1986, he made a choice that would define everything. He founded World Changers Ministries Christian Center in the cafeteria of Kathleen Mitchell Elementary, the same spot where his mother formerly prepared meals and where he himself had once been part of the school's first Black integration group. Only 8 people attended that first service. However, his straightforward, self-assured, and useful message struck a chord. Crowds rose rapidly, and his ambition grew along with his congregation. What started in a cafeteria would quickly grow into one of America's biggest mega-churches, and his message of prosperity would make him a household name. But concealed in that ascent were flaws that would one day expand into something far more destructive: the gospel of prosperity that created an empire. As World Changers Ministries expanded, the message that marked Creflo Dollar's success also became the foundation of his greatest controversies. Over the course of the late 1980s and early 1990s, Dollar developed the prosperity gospel, which would serve as the focal point of his worldwide influence. He preached that faith, positive confession, and generous giving, especially tithing, could unlock financial riches and personal success. To struggling families It seemed like optimism. To believers hoping for a second chance, it felt like divine strategy. And with every sermon, every broadcast, and every promise of breakthrough, the audiences continued to swell. By 1991, his ministry had grown so great that he renamed it World Changers Church International, reflecting the reach he believed God had given him. His radio and television programs quickly followed, culminating in the introduction of Changing Your World. Millions of homes were exposed to his teachings thanks to these broadcasts. By the mid-1990s, he was no longer a local preacher. His congregation spanned far beyond College Park, and he was a global televangelist. People in Africa, Canada, India, and the UK began following his words, believing that financial miracles were finally within reach. His ascendancy was epitomized by the World Dome, a huge sanctuary with 8,500 seats that was finished in 1995 at a cost of around $20 million. Dollar emphasized that it was constructed without bank funding, which he claimed was evidence of what generosity and faith could achieve. By the mid-2000s, WCCI reported over 30,000 members and approximately $70 million in yearly revenue. And when the ministry spread into New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Johannesburg, Houston, and the Gold Coast, Dollar revealed a vision of 500 fellowship churches around the world. Yet, underlying the speed, there was a building tension. The more he preached prosperity, the more critics questioned the wealth he himself accumulated from that doctrine. He was viewed by his supporters as a living example of how faith led to prosperity. Skeptics saw something else: a pastor whose lifestyle appeared to match corporate CEOs more than spiritual leaders. Luxury mansions, Rolls-Royces, private aircraft. The gap between appreciation and skepticism widened with every new acquisition. Nevertheless, the machine continued to expand. Dollar thought he was creating an empire of spirituality, but others worried whether he was building something far more fragile, a structure that could collapse the moment one pillar of his religion was challenged. And that moment was coming. Wealth, luxury, and the first fractures in the foundation. As Creflo Dollar's ministry developed, so did the attention on his personal lifestyle, a level of affluence rarely seen among pastors, even those within the prosperity gospel movement. While the average household in College Park made around $29,000 annually, Dollar made $3.4 million in Fayetteville, Georgia, while many of his followers had poor incomes. The house was situated on 182.5 acres and included lengthy stone walls, a pool, a large fountain, and a private gated drive that protected the property from the public. It became a symbol of both his prosperity and his growing estrangement from the people he preached to. He also possessed a high-rise condo in New York City's Time Warner Center, purchased for $2.5 million, and subsequently sold for a profit of $3.75 million. There was another home in New Jersey, estimated at over $2 million. There were apparently many Rolls-Royces in his garage, at least one of which was worth about $460,000. To his detractors, these objects showed excess, but to him, they were proofs of God's bounty. Even his means of mobility revealed the scale of his desire. Dollar had flown an old Gulfstream G3, which had already suffered 2 mechanical failures, one over the Pacific Ocean and another before takeoff in London, long before the jet scandal broke. He maintained that a private plane was a government requirement rather than a luxury, and that commercial airlines did not operate his timetable. Nevertheless, for many onlookers, each of these possessions, the houses, vehicles, and jets, eroded the legitimacy of his message. Concerns were voiced by church monitoring organizations. Ministry Watch regularly assigned his organization an F rating for financial transparency, citing his failure to reveal basic audited records. The U.S. Senate Finance Committee looked into him and 5 other televangelists between 2007 and 2011, raising concerns about possible personal use of ministry funds. Dollar refused to turn up financial documents, alleging that the government had no right to review his records. Legally, he survived that chapter. No charges were brought, but reputationally, the damage was done. For the first time, the foundations of his public image began to reveal fractures. His detractors noticed a trend: wealth without responsibility, spiritual leadership without openness. And what came next? Those gaps would be pushed wide open by an incident that would go down as one of his career's most notorious moments. The nation was rocked by the $65 million jet scandal. Criticism against Creflo Dollar has become commonplace by 2015. However, nothing prepared him for the public uproar that erupted when he started Project G650, a fundraising initiative in which he asked fans to contribute to the purchase of a $65 million Gulfstream G650 private jet. Even devoted followers were taken aback by the proposal. Dollar insisted the jet wasn't about luxury, but about accomplishing the work of God. His previous aircraft, a Gulfstream G3 from 1984, had encountered serious mechanical troubles, including an engine failure over the Pacific and a nose gear collapse in London. Dollar maintained that since airlines didn't follow God's plan, traveling commercially wasn't an option. The campaign wanted 200,000 people to donate at least $300 each, a call that immediately swept over social media, major news channels, and religious communities. Almost soon, aviation professionals began pointing up irregularities. Dollar's ministry claimed the new jet would allow them to deliver 100,000 lbs of food and supplies for humanitarian assistance, although the GSCX 150-650's baggage capacity was only around 2,500, significantly below what the ministry publicly proclaimed. The criticism was fast and fierce. Why a preacher required the priciest private plane in the world was questioned by critics. Why was he unable to select a more economical, smaller aircraft? Why should his supporters, many of whom made far less than he did, have to foot the bill? Leaders voiced their opinions even within the Christian community. Gospel musician Kirk Franklin publicly denounced the notion that having plenty of financial possessions indicated faith, calling it an indication of a lack of morality. The fundraising website was discreetly taken down in a matter of days due to widespread outcry. But Dollar did not back down. He addressed his applauding audience during a sermon soon after the controversy. "You cannot stop me if I want to believe God for I'm going to dream till Jesus comes." The enthusiasm inside the church contrasted strongly with the fury outside it. The issue revived the Senate's earlier concerns about openness and financial accountability among televangelists. Although Dollar later purchased private jets through other methods, the harm to his public image was irreversible. For many, the jet represented everything that detractors feared. A pastor whose wealth appeared to be directly correlated with his level of faith. And as the scrutiny grew increasingly intense, a much more painful and intimate chapter was about to begin. Arrest, family strife, and the start of a public breakdown. Creflo Dollar had appeared unbeatable for years, a man whose followers thought he possessed unquestionable spiritual authority, whose lectures reached billions of households, and whose influence spanned continents. But in June 2012, things changed inside his own home in Fayette County, Georgia. The pastor, who preached discipline, faith, and divine order, was abruptly placed in handcuffs. The police report states that when a furious disagreement got out of hand, Dollar's 15-year-old daughter called the police. When she disobeyed his decision to prevent her from going to a party, she said he choked her, wrestled her to the ground, punched her, and even struck her with a shoe. Officers noted a scratch on her neck, which she claimed was caused by the fight. However, Dollar claimed to the authorities that it was only dermatitis, and that he had just restrained her after she struck him. He denied hitting or choking her, although he did acknowledge wrestling her to the ground. Within hours, news of his detention circulated nationwide. The picture of a preacher being hauled into custody contrasted dramatically with the lectures he preached each week about spiritual authority and family order. His reputation was under more scrutiny than before due to the charge of simple violence and cruelty to minors. A few days later, Dollar addressed his congregation and referred to the charges as being overblown. Many saw him as a victim of miscommunication and media misrepresentation, and the congregation erupted in praise. Supporters claimed parents had a right to chastise their children. Critics stated that a boundary had been passed, and that religious communities too often protected leaders at the expense of victims. Legally, the case ended quietly. The charges were dropped after Dollar completed a court-ordered anger management program. However, the harm persisted. For the first time, even some devoted supporters secretly questioned what was going on behind the scenes of the meticulously displayed universe. At the same time, doubters brought up old issues, such as the pricey residences, the unresolved financial issues, and the widening gap between the community and the pastor. Not merely a family crisis was revealed by the arrest. Beneath the empire he had established, it revealed human frailty. Later on, a single disclosure would rock that enterprise more severely than any previous scandal. He publicly recognized one of the basic principles that created his ministry had been false all along. The bombshell confession that changed everything. For more than 3 decades, Creflo Dollar built his empire on one message. Tithing was mandated by God. He repeated it in conferences all over the world, wrote best-selling books, and preached it on television. Giving 10% of their earnings was more than just charity to his disciples. It was a spiritual commitment, a key to unlocking God's financial favor. Many stretched their budgets, believing they were planting seeds that would return miracles. Dollar's net worth was previously believed to exceed $27 million, making him one of the richest preachers in America. But in June 2022, he came onto the stage of World Changers Church International and delivered words virtually no one anticipated to hear. Dollar informed his audience that his decades-long tithing beliefs were incorrect in a lecture titled "The Great Misunderstanding." He asked them to discard all of the sermons, books, and DVDs he had written about the topic. He clarified that tithing was a part of Old Testament law, and that Christians under grace were never supposed to give out of necessity, fear, or guilt. Supporters were taken aback by the spectacular reversal, while detractors were incensed. Some saw it as an act of integrity. For others, it was an acknowledgement made decades too late. Despite acknowledging his prior misdeeds, Dollar refused to apologize. He asserted that without preaching those lessons, he wouldn't have gained the spiritual awareness he has now. But many dispute the timing. His ministry was structurally and financially based on the very doctrine he now disapproved of. People asked if he would refund money received under teachings he now judged inappropriate. However, Dollar did not provide any financial transparency, restitution, or reimbursements. His opulent residences, vehicles, and private aircraft were unaltered. Watchdog groups continued to complain that his ministry lacked accountability. Theological critics said the reversal showed what they had maintained for years, that the prosperity gospel was founded on flimsy grounds. Even some lifelong followers felt misled, wondering what to trust, after being told the cornerstone of their generosity had been a misunderstanding. Although millions of people's perceptions of Creflo Dollar were altered by the confession, his ministry was not destroyed. The man who preached prosperity, certainty, and divine order was confronted with a new story for the first time, one in which he was no longer shielded from the repercussions of his own teachings by the riches he had promised others. What do you think about Pastor Creflo Dollar's current troubles? Do you think he should be held accountable for the lessons he now rejects? Please let us know what you think below, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video to see more tales like this one.